Okay, so this video is a general discussion of the things I've learned over the past 4 years, a little bit of background on how I got to help the dogs, how I decided would be the most efficient way to help, what I would generally do to help, and maybe it'll give people a few good ideas on what they can do to make a little bit of a difference around their own area. So I came to Bali in after COVID in May 2022. I started hanging around with people who had a lot of experience in dog rescue, and I listened to some of the great things that can be done, some of the pitfalls, and was able to see what was most needed for dogs. And I ended up moving into a place where there were 5 puppies, and one of the puppies had something tightly, a cable tie tightly wrapped around its neck. So we chopped that off, and so I always recommend with doing any street treatment or feeding that you bring a scissors or a knife with you, and check collars, because sometimes a collar or whatever will go on a dog and the dog will grow, or maybe a red ribbon that they've been uh, treated, marked as treated for rabies, but they've outgrown the ribbon. So I always do a little collar check when I can. And so anyway, I saw the puppies all had a skin problem. So a lady who was an expert in dog rescue chopped up blue Bravecto into, I think, 16 or 24 pieces. We gave a little piece to each dog. Within 2 weeks, they were all fine. All the skin was fine. So that was kind of my introduction. And I then realized with those dogs, well, they're going to need to be fed. They need a little bit of coconut oil on the skin and get their vaccines. So you can often get a vet out to give vaccines. So then obviously feeding the dogs every day. I find here that feeding the dogs chicken heads cooked with rice is nice and easy. It's not messy. If you boil chicken heads, you often end up with a lot of gravy left over. Sometimes you can give it to dogs, but it's a bit messy. So cooking chicken heads and rice together and just feeding the local dogs around your area is always a good shout. If you notice dogs are skinny, give them a deworming tablet like Mectin. If you know they're itchy, you see my videos on skin treatment. It's very simple. Buy the big tablet, chop it to the size, and treat the whole lot of them, rather than spending lots of money buying an individual tablet for an individual dog. And so trying to see what's useful for the dog right away. So obviously they would need to get fed every day, maybe making them a little bit friendly, getting them their vaccines, and then letting other people around you know that they've had the vaccine. I mean, you might want to check if they've been vaccinated already, but generally you'll know it. It's unlikely even a family will vaccinate them other than a rabies vaccine. So you can get the vaccines early enough. I have a document on puppy care. I think like 8 weeks or something, they can get a complete vaccine that doesn't include rabies, and a month later they can get another vaccine. Generally not advised before 4 months to vaccinate for rabies, but if they're very strong and very healthy and no other issues, maybe 3 months is okay. So you could vaccinate them at 2 months, and then with the vet's agreement, maybe on 3 months with rabies. But that's up to you if you want to get the rabies separate. And you're looking at about 200 for a complete vaccine, or 250, something like that. And the vet will come out and you agree prices beforehand and try to get it done with local vets. You always have the option, as I always say, with coconut oil and fresh aloe vera gel, although coconut oil is a lot more effective if they have little bacteria problems or stuff like that. A few times rubbed with coconut oil will probably sort it, and you have to be careful of the eyes. So yeah, I found myself in that situation where I had lots of puppies there. The lady who showed me about the skin medicine was able to get, I think, 2 of the dogs adopted, and then there was adult dogs there as well. So obviously so they sort of had an owner. They were dumped by the owner at the owner's farm, and might have occasionally got a few scraps from the owner. And then there was a street feeder going by who was feeding them. So I saw her doing that every day. A wonderful Balinese lady who gets very little support. So I support her and buy her some 20 kilogram bags of food. I always find, like, if someone's already getting the results, then probably the most efficient way is to support them. And then later, if I want a favor, I've already given a favor, and I think that's a very, very important thing as well, to understand that a lot of people that do dog rescue are extremely busy, they're extremely stressed financially, emotionally, and all that. They get an incredible reward from it. I mean, it's amazing stuff, but it's a tough thing taking care of a lot of living beings and being concerned for their welfare. So when I see somebody doing something really good, I always think, how can I make their life a bit easier? What are the things that I could easily do to be of benefit to them, and maybe ask them what's the most helpful. And if people are in any doubt, they can always just directly buy from Timbal Jaya Pet Shop and Vet Care in Denpasar. If you order a minimum of three 20-kilogram bags of dog choice lamb or dog choice beef, the dogs generally prefer lamb flavour, uh, they will deliver them directly to a street feeder. So I always think that's a good shout, because I never like to ask people for favours unless I've done people favours already, and knowing that I may find myself in that situation later, that I had a limited time I'm going to stay in that place. I had a 1 year lease, and so I figure that person's going to continue on, and they're already doing great stuff, and I like to support it, and so to help her. And then I decided to do the skin medicine around her. So I started with the dogs, saw amazing results, and I said, hey, well, I'll try to do 100. So I've treated whatever 10 or 20 dogs. Let's try to do 100, and I'm at about 5,000 dogs fully treated for skin and worming tablets. I don't count the dogs that I've dewormed. It's so easy, and the Mectin's cheap, and nearly every dog you're going to come across is going to need a deworming tablet almost. It's supposed to be done every 3 months, but it's unlikely they'd be done very regularly here. They'd be lucky to get once in their whole life. Um, so having deworming tablets around is always handy. Mectin can be used for cats as well. So then I decided to try to do 500, and then 1,000, and then I set myself some goals. And also I felt it was a good way to get attention to the plight of the dogs, that the dogs are itchy, and if you're itchy, it's very hard to have a good life. And we have to start with foundations, like, if you have the idea that you're single-handedly going to transform the whole dog rescue world in a country or in a continent, you're kidding yourself. But what you can do is you can help around your area, and you may find, actually, by doing that and by spreading word and by everybody doing a little bit, that you do end up transforming dog rescue around the island and the continent, and you raise the standard of welfare, and that's massive, and that kind of focus, I feel, that on raising the overall standard of welfare, the average standard of welfare, where dogs are likely to get born into the country. You may not always be able to control what happens for the dogs. They can get hit by traffic, they can eat poison, there's all kinds of things that can happen. And rather than get fixated on taking dogs into my home and taking full responsibility for them, and I'm not in a position to do that. I'm not staying here long term, and I don't have the resources to do that anyway. But what I can do is try to make a situation for them where the standard of care around me has been raised. And by doing that, I feel that we can have a much bigger knock-on effect on dogs. So by getting the female sterilized, at least, getting the male sterilized is very good. It stops the spread of TVT cancer, which is a cancer under genitalia, and it spreads. And also then you have less puppies, and you have dogs settled in one location. And then to tell everybody around what you're doing, tell the locals, and often the locals will then start to see the personalities of the dogs. The dogs look very good, and so in that way you kind of get people's perceptions start to change a little bit. They start to really appreciate the dogs and the cats too, and slightly change their attitude and maybe expectation of how things can be done. And I also feel that if people are used to seeing a load of street dogs in bad condition, and then suddenly, like if you drive around Ubud now, I feel that through my efforts and other people on the Facebook group and street feeders like Ibu Ami, who's Mimi Lady Cat on Facebook, through efforts of a lot of people, that it's totally different now over the last 4 years since I started. It's much more difficult to see dogs that have no hair and that are in dreadful condition, whereas before I could drive down one road and treat 20 dogs no problem in bad condition. So that's no longer the case. So I feel that's very successful. And the greatest compliment I was paid was by a guy I was speaking to in a restaurant a couple of weeks ago, and he said his friend visited Ubud, and she said she was surprised. Normally in Asia you have mangy dogs everywhere, but they're all fluffy. So I thought that was wonderful, and I will take some of the credit for that because I just took the medicine with me wherever I went. I was driving to Sanur from Kaliki to go to yoga, and I decided I wasn't going to pass any dogs. And if I ran out of medicine, the next time I was there, I was going to help them, and I was going to stop and give food. And so also that leads on to, I mean, some dogs are scared. So if you're passing dogs regularly, if you start to leave down a portion of food at the side of the street, I'm always careful that I may not have seen all the dogs that are there, and there might be a fight for that food. So I try not to leave it beside the road, or I try to leave it over the edge of a laneway. So if two dogs fight, they're not going to go out in the middle of traffic, or take a look that there's not a dog across the road who's going to race across and fight for the food and maybe get hit by traffic and cause a person to be injured on a motorbike. So I always try to make sure I'm mindful when I put down the food. I'm careful. And after you put down food for dogs a few times, especially if it's cooked chicken, those dogs are going to come running when they see you. So you may not be able to treat an itchy dog right away, but after you've put down food a few times, it may become very easy to do that. So I use boiled chicken heads. They're like 10 to 15,000 a kilogram. Bit of rice. White rice is generally better. Brown rice is more nutritious, but if you're given medicine, white rice is good because they're familiar with it. And white rice cooked with chicken, and just put the medicine wrapped in a bit of chicken and check afterwards that they've eaten the medicine. So I think that is a very nice, realistic, easy way to start. You can ask around on Facebook, is there cheap sterilization? Is there a vet who come out and maybe sterilize 10 dogs in one go? And so you get all the dogs sterilized around you, because also something to remember is that if you decide to help dogs on your road or in your area, it might be best when people ask you exactly where you live that you don't tell them exactly where you live. You don't have to lie, but you don't have to tell them exactly where you live, because if you do, they might think, oh, the Boule loves puppies, and you might wake up to a gang of puppies dumped on your doorstep. So you don't want to put the people in the position that they make a lot of bad karma like that, and you don't want to make life difficult for yourself. So it might be a good idea not to be too precise with what you say. And sometimes I find it a little bit of an advantage not to speak too much Indonesian, and not to get particularly involved. It's just about the dog. It's just about helping. Generally, with the owner, I give the medicine, but I give it myself. I don't get the owner to do it because they have a tendency to run at the dog with the plate of food. The dog scarpers, and it makes it very difficult. And then discuss with the family and show them the information leaflet and ask them to pass it on to their friends, and show them a few before and after photos so they realize. And I often find, they don't really know what I'm doing at the time, and they're a bit confused why some big Irish fella has pulled up with running after their itchy, mangy dog. But when I call back a few weeks later, they're like, wow, the dog looks so good. And then they understand. And also, I think that when those dogs that have been extremely itchy, or they're turning to stone, like dogs who get scabies, they've got that lifted dry skin, they're turning to stone. Now, if we change that in an area and people see itchy dogs, and a lot of the people are quite wealthy around Ubud, and they see itchy dogs in their own compound, but the street dogs all look like Crufts champions. So hopefully that makes them think, well, obviously dogs aren't supposed to look like that. That's not natural. And I suspect that in a dog's natural environment, where they would have had more jungle, and maybe there would have been some natural controls. I know with wolves that only the top female will come into heat, so it keeps the numbers under control. And I suspect that's probably the same with dogs. But we as humans have changed the natural environment. So it's a bit of a cop-out to then say, oh, let's let nature take its course in our concrete jungle, which we've created, where we have our motorbikes and everything else, because we're not letting nature take its course when it suits us. So we have to also be mindful that some responsibility goes with changing the environment and changing the natural life cycles for dogs. So that's quite an easy win. Sterilizing the dog. So first things first is, what does the dog need? How can I help? and trying to do that in an economical way so you can help a lot more dogs. You can get good information on Facebook. Um, you see a lot of people running around talking about get the dog to the vet, blah blah. I've heard it so many times, and then I post a photo of the dog a month later, and with an "I told you so." You can waste a lot of time on Facebook. People like to have a lot of opinions on Facebook, but I'm more interested. Does somebody have the experience? Do they have the evidence there of dogs they've helped? Do they have a reason for being so outspoken? So I try not to get too involved on Facebook, and try not to get too involved in squabbles about is Simparica, Brevecto, or NexGard better. They're fine. The dogs, like I said, there's a huge tolerance for extra doses and stuff like that, and the dogs are lucky to get one dose in their life, so it's probably not something we need to worry about right now. But also can set up Facebook groups to try to raise awareness and post the pictures of the dogs, maybe not with direct maps or not with direct information about where the dog is, because we have to be mindful of the dog's safety, and we don't know who's on those Facebook groups really. They're just profiles, and if it gets popular, there will be dog meat traders. I don't think the Balinese generally get involved in that, but there will be foreign workers over, and they maybe have different cultural things in their community. And so I've seen that happen with dogs that I love, and I've seen poisonings happening with dogs that I love many times, and that's just the way. But what I can control is how I behave towards them and how I treat them, and my own effect, and am I willing to inconvenience myself for their happiness. If I see puppies whose legs are bending and it doesn't suit me to, I've already driven long enough and maybe spent a couple of hours out feeding and giving some medicine. Am I going to drive to the pet shop half an hour, and am I going to drive back and mix it with some food that they like, and maybe buy some eggs and give it to a kind local who cares about them so they get the protein and they get milk? And I try to make sure that, yeah, I am willing to be selfless and inconvenience myself. And so I think that's a good lesson as a human, to try to be selfless and to try to make difficult sacrifices, because with generosity, it's a very clear indicator. If you're willing to spend your own limited funds on other living beings, then you can be confident that you're a generous person. Sometimes a lot of generosity in Western culture, and probably in Asian culture too, is just transactional. I'll get something for you with the expectation you get something for me, and that's all. It's still good to be generous, it's still good to be nice, but the dog can't do anything for you in return. And so it's definitely going to be a one-way generosity, at least financially. So the dogs can return the favors. They can keep your place safe. They can keep you safe. Around your area your villa won't be getting burglarized if you help the dogs there. The dogs are probably able to walk in and out. If anyone comes near your villa, they will be getting a rough reception, and they won't be hanging around long. So that was certainly the case where I was staying, and all the other villas got burglarized and I didn't. And so I was feeding the dogs here all the time, and so the dogs protected me. Not that I had anything worth stealing, but I still didn't have the inconvenience of the place being broken into, and maybe some of the stress that goes with that. So, yeah, my suggestion is just to be proactive. And if being proactive is just carrying around that, I like that dog choice lamb because it's in 25 800-gram packets, so I can just throw them into the boot of my motorbike and bring them with me everywhere. I like to bring the Simparica. I bring a little container, like a little round, what would be like something for lip balm, or else the empty containers from those snus, the nicotine packets, they work well. And so if I open medicine, I keep it in that, and I usually try to use the medicine quickly enough. If I've opened Simparica, I usually try to use it within 3 to 4 days maximum. I'm conscious that the heat may degrade it and the humidity, and I don't want to waste my money. And so maybe I'll drive a little bit out of my way to make sure I use that if I've gone to the trouble of opening a packet. And so, yeah, there's some simple little things. I don't want the videos going on 20 minutes now. I don't want to go on too long, but I start my little things with food, with the basic medicine to make sure they're comfortable. Maybe proactively sterilizing the female dogs around your area, then around your villa, maybe on your street and your gang, and so that it's a lot cheaper to do that, and people will be willing to support that. I asked my friends and family in Ireland, and they've just been amazing. They've helped me so much. and I'm really grateful for that, because I couldn't have done what I did. I already have spent so much money, so much of my own money as it is, and without that help, I really couldn't have done what I was able to do for the dogs. And yeah, like I said, 5,000 dogs fully treated. So that also has a knock-on effect, that they don't spread the skin parasites if they have puppies, if they to other dogs. So it has a much bigger knock-on effect. I'd maybe sterilized by this stage, I don't know, guessing about 50 dogs, something like that, and vaccinated maybe less than that, but I don't know, 30 dogs, something. So it's my contribution. I focused in on the skin medicine. I like to have that little bit of focus. If that focus is, I'd like to be no itchy dogs in my area. If it's Penistana, I go around and check that. Or maybe it's, I'm going to feed those dogs at my villa every day. I'm going to sterilize them and vaccinate them and take care of their skin. And also then to inform other people that we can do the same thing. You know, we talk about so much stupidity in the world about, and you see what people with money do. They build missiles, and or people in power with money, excuse me, people in power with money, they end up fighting over estates and building missiles and attacking each other and all that stupidity, you know, that goes with power. And maybe to an extent it's unavoidable, not blaming them. But we can focus in on doing something really good for far less resources and really make a difference, you know. And that direct action, we can have a lot of self-esteem when we behave like that, and we might be surprised about the knock-on effect that has on our street and our community. And so to pass on that information and to discuss doing good things with people, because what's the point in talking about politics? What's the point in talking about football? You know, if you're a professional footballer, fine, talk about football, but what's really the point? And a lot of these things that we talk about are talking about ourselves and our feelings and our epiphanies and our depressions and God forbid our romances. You know, this stuff is pretty silly. I think it's useful to talk about how can we improve our community, how can we have harmony in our community, how can we raise the standard of welfare for other living beings, and we will all get the knock-on benefit from that, and we'll have a far better community and a far better world if we focus in on that. If we focus in on the wars that are happening, if we focus in on climate change and stuff that we can't really change, okay, we can make those changes in our daily life and try our best. But there's certain things that are outside of our control, and if we discuss them and stress about them endlessly, it won't lead to greater happiness or peacefulness of mind. But if we take direct action around our area and we have discussions with people, and I've made it clear to a lot of people that I do expect them to behave as in a ordinary human way, and to be willing to spend €5 or €10 to get a vet to check a dog. I don't think that's too much to ask if they live beside the dog. So I think a lot of people, from my experience around Ubud and the spiritual community, I think a lot of people have missed the basic key points of being a good human, which is being honest, being reliable, being a harmless person. I take it to the extent not to even kill a mosquito. I think that's bad karma, and I think that's a good standard to have. And to just try to get the little things right. If we get the little things right, if we get the little things right with the dogs, with the cats, we'll get the little things right with other people. And to realize we can have ordinary intelligent discussions. It doesn't have to be fixed in a certain window of stuff we can talk about, like we talk about our latest romance, or we talk about what's in the news. You know, this is real stupidity, and I feel there's a lot of pressure in our society to conform to stupidity, and we will see the results of that if we can conform in that way. So I think that, like I said, by doing these simple basic things, by doing some service, by doing things without any hope of any financial reward, and quite the opposite, that we will benefit ourselves the most in the long run, in the big picture, and we will have the biggest effect to improve our community as a result. Okay, I wish you good luck in whatever service you choose to do, and I hope that you can reference my other videos where I have in links in the comments to where you can buy stuff, and all the questions about skin treatment are certainly answered in there. Okay, good luck. Thank you.